The road isn't much to look at. To most people, it's just 3/4 of a mile of packed gravel and crushed stone, wide enough for one truck and a little bit of shoulder. It winds through a stand of old-growth hickory and oak, crosses a stone culvert over a creek that only runs in the spring, and ends where my property meets the county highway. My father and I laid the last of the stone ourselves, 30 years ago, with a rented roller and a lot of sweat. Every scrape of a snowplow blade in winter, every pothole I fill in the summer, is a part of a conversation I've been having with this land my whole life. It's not just a road, it's the artery to my home, the place where the world falls away and my own quiet life begins. I'm a land surveyor, or I was, mostly retired now. For 40 years I walked other people's properties, deciphering the legal poetry of deeds and planting iron pins to mark the precise, invisible lines where one person's world ended and another's began. It's a job that teaches you patience and precision. You learn that assumptions are the mother of all boundary disputes. You learn that the earth remembers things, old fence lines, forgotten cornerstones, the slight depression of a road that hasn't been used in a century. And you learn that most trouble starts when someone looks at a piece of land and only sees what they want it to be, not what it is. So, when the first letter from Pinnacle Developments arrived, I read it with a surveyor's eye. It was printed on heavy cream-colored cardstock, the kind of paper meant to convey effortless expense. It spoke of an exciting new community, the summit at Hawthorne, and the shared prosperity it would bring. The language was all fluff and air, vibrant living, natural harmony, modern convenience. Buried in the third paragraph was the real point. They had acquired the 80-acre parcel landlocked behind my 10 acres and were interested in discussing access solutions. I knew exactly what that meant. They wanted my road. I put the letter on the stack of junk mail and went back to oiling the handle of a shovel. A week later, a car I didn't recognize crunched its way up my driveway. It was a black luxury sedan, the kind that looks perpetually out of place on a gravel road. A woman in a sharp gray pantsuit got out. She had the kind of forced bright smile that doesn't quite reach the eyes. She introduced herself as Brenda Sterling, Senior Project Manager for Pinnacle. "Mr. Vance," she said, extending a hand. Her grip was firm, practiced. "I hope I'm not disturbing you. I'm just so excited about what we're building here. It's going to be a real asset to the community." I nodded, not offering a smile back. "I got your letter." "Wonderful. Then you know why I'm here? Your property presents a unique opportunity for a partnership. A gateway, really, to Hawthorne's most prestigious new address." She spoke in marketing slogans. I waited. She gestured vaguely at my road. "That access point is, to be frank, perfect. It's direct, it's established, and it would save us a tremendous amount of time and environmental disruption. We'd, of course, compensate you generously for an easement, pave it, maintain it in perpetuity. You wouldn't have to lift a finger." I looked past her, at the old hickory tree my grandfather planted. Its leaves were just starting to turn. "It's not for sale." Her smile faltered for a fraction of a second. "Oh, I think you misunderstand. We don't want to buy your property, Mr. Vance. Just the right of way. An easement. It's a very common, very lucrative arrangement for landowners." "I understand what an easement is," I said, my voice flat. "I'm a surveyor, and the road isn't for sale. The access isn't for sale." This seemed to genuinely confuse her. She tilted her head, as if trying to solve a puzzle. "But why? Our offer would be substantial. Think of what you could do. A new truck, travel, investments." "I have a truck. I don't like to travel." "My investments are my business," I said. "This is my home. That's my road. I like it the way it is. Quiet." She recalibrated, the corporate smile clicking back into place. Of course. I completely respect that. Privacy is a luxury. But perhaps you haven't seen our preliminary offer." She pulled a folder from a leather portfolio. "We're prepared to offer you $75,000 for a strip of gravel. It's more than generous." I didn't even look at the paper. 75,000 was an insult. The cost of building a new road from the other side of their parcel, through rougher terrain and wetlands that would require mitigation, would be in the millions. They were trying to buy $1 million solution for the price of a mid-range sedan. It wasn't a negotiation. It was a test to see how stupid I was. "The answer is no, Ms. Sterling," I said. "I'd appreciate it if you closed the gate on your way out." I turned and walked back to my workshop, leaving her standing in my driveway. I could feel her eyes on my back, a mixture of disbelief and irritation. This wasn't how her script was supposed to go. People like me were supposed to see the dollar signs and fold. I didn't look back. I picked up my shovel and got back to work. I figured that would be the end of it. Any sensible developer would now go to their plan B. I had, after all, given them a clear, unambiguous answer. But I was forgetting the first rule of dealing with people like Brenda Sterling. They don't hear the word no. They only hear a problem that requires a different application of pressure. For a few months, things were quiet. The leaves fell from the hickory, and the first snows dusted the gravel on my road. I thought maybe they had found another way, or that the project had stalled. Then, just after the new year, I heard the distant rumble. It was the sound of heavy machinery, the low growl of diesel engines, and the metallic clank of treads. I walked to the back of my property, to the old stone wall that marked my boundary line. Through the bare trees, I could see them. Bulldozers, excavators, earth movers. They were clearing the 80 acres behind me, tearing into the landscape with brutal efficiency. They had started their project. They were using a rough, temporary access cut through a neighboring farm, a muddy track that was clearly not sustainable for a major construction project, let alone residential traffic. They were betting on me. They had broken ground on a 40-unit condominium complex with no viable, permanent road, operating on the pure, uncut arrogance that I would eventually sell them mine. They hadn't just ignored my no. They had built a multi-million-dollar project on the assumption that my no was irrelevant. The phone calls started a week later. It was Brenda Sterling again. Her tone had changed. The breezy confidence was gone, replaced by a strained, businesslike urgency. "Mr. Vance, we need to talk," she said, skipping the pleasantries. "We have crews on site now, and the logistics are becoming critical. I'm authorized to increase our offer for the easement to $125,000. That's a significant jump. We can have a check to you by the end of the week." "I remember our last conversation, Ms. Sterling," I said, my voice calm. "My answer hasn't changed." "Be reasonable," she snapped, a crack in her professional veneer. "This project is happening. It's been approved by the county. 40 families are going to live here. You can't just stand in the way of progress because you're feeling sentimental about a dirt path." "It's not a dirt path, and it's my property," I said. "You decided to build your project without securing legal access. That sounds like a Pinnacle Development's problem, not an Arthur Vance problem." I heard her take a sharp breath. "I think you'll find it will become your problem. When our residents can't get to their homes, who do you think they, and the county, will look at? The developer who built beautiful new housing, or the stubborn old man blocking the road?" "I'm not blocking anything," I said. "I'm just living on my own land. You have a good day, Miss Sterling." I hung up the phone. It was the last time I spoke to her. The calls kept coming, sometimes 2 or 3 a day. Her voicemails became a fascinating study in escalating desperation. They started with firm corporate reminders of her offer. Then they moved to veiled threats about legal action and public opinion. Then they became pleading, her voice tight with a stress that was clearly taking its toll. I never answered. I saved every message. The construction noise became the backdrop to my life. The constant beep, beep, beep of trucks backing up, the roar of engines, the percussive thud of nail guns. Dust settled on everything. I started keeping a log. I bought a new digital camera with a powerful zoom lens. From the ridge at the back of my property, I had a clear view of their entire operation. I took pictures every day documenting their progress. The foundations were poured, the frames went up. The buildings started to take shape, monolithic and out of place against the wooded hills. 40 condos, 80 bedrooms, at least 40 cars, probably more, that had nowhere to go. One afternoon in early April, I was walking my boundary line, checking the iron pins I had set years ago. It's a habit for a surveyor, like a baker checking his ovens. I found one of my rear corner markers disturbed. The ground around it was chewed up by tire tracks, heavy equipment tracks. The pin itself, a 3-foot length of rebar with a yellow plastic cap bearing my license number, was bent sideways at a 45-degree angle. A few feet away, a pile of construction debris, broken concrete and rebar scraps, had been dumped squarely on my side of the line. It wasn't an accident. An operator would have to be blind or malicious to do that. It was a message, a little nudge. We can cross this line whenever we want. I felt a cold, hard anger settle in my chest. This was my line. I had surveyed it. I had marked it. I had respected it. It was a physical manifestation of a legal fact, and they had literally bent it. My quiet refusal had just turned into a cold war. This was the moment the annoyance transformed into resolve. It was no longer just about my road. It was about that bent pin. It was about the fundamental principle of my profession. A line is a line. I didn't call them. I didn't. I didn't yell or complain. That's what they wanted. They wanted me to engage, to get angry, to give them something to work with. I did something else. I meticulously photographed the bent marker from every angle. I took close-ups of the tire tracks. I took wide shots showing the debris pile and their construction site in the background. I used my own GPS unit to record the precise coordinates. I documented everything with the dispassionate precision of a crime scene investigator. Then I went home, filed the photos, and wrote a detailed entry in my log. That night, I went down to my basement. In old metal filing cabinets, I had the records of nearly every survey I'd ever done, including the ones for my own property and all the surrounding parcels, going back decades. I pulled the files for the old Hawthorne farm, the 80 acres they were building on. I unrolled the brittle yellowed maps under the bare bulb of my workshop light. I started reading. I read the original deed from the 1890s, with its metes and bounds descriptions calling out a large white oak, then southwesterly to a pile of stones. I traced the history of the land through every sale, every subdivision, every transfer of title. I was looking for something specific, a ghost, an echo in the legal record. Developers, especially ones in a hurry, often do their due diligence with a checklist mentality. They look for current easements, obvious liens, and zoning restrictions. They don't always dig into the history. They don't look for the things the land remembers. And that's when I found it. It wasn't much. A single sentence in a deed from 1952, when the Hawthorne farm was sold by a man named Silas Croft to the family that eventually sold it to Pinnacle. The deed conveyed the 80 acres, but it included a restrictive covenant. It was an old, peculiar type of restriction, something you rarely see anymore. Silas Croft, whose own homestead was on the other side of the ridge, had kept timber rights for himself and his heirs on a 10-acre section of the property. But more importantly, the deed explicitly stated that no permanent right-of-way for the purpose of subdivision or commercial development could be granted across the northern boundary, the boundary that bordered my property. It was a dead-hand covenant, an attempt by an old farmer to control his land from beyond the grave. He didn't want a road punched through that stretch of woods, period. Such covenants can sometimes be challenged in court and extinguished, but it's a difficult, time-consuming, and expensive process. And crucially, for it to be extinguished, it has to be acknowledged. Pinnacle's own title report, if they had done a thorough one, should have flagged it. Either they had missed it, or they had seen it, and gambled that no one would ever notice or enforce it. They gambled that the only person it might affect, me, was just a stubborn old man they could bully or buy. I sat there in my dusty basement, the old map spread out on my workbench, and I felt the first real smile I'd had in months. They hadn't just built a housing development without a road. They had built it on a piece of land that was legally restricted from having the very road they needed. Their multi-million-dollar assumption wasn't just arrogant, it was built on a foundation of professional negligence. I made a certified copy of the 1952 deed the next day at the county clerk's office. I didn't send it to them. I didn't call a lawyer. I put it in my file, with the photos of the bent survey pin and the logs of Brenda's increasingly frantic voicemails. My best weapon was silence. Their project was their prison, and the walls were getting higher every day. The framing was done, the roofs were on, and the windows were being installed. They were getting closer and closer to a finish line they couldn't cross. Every nail they hammered was another nail in their own coffin. The calls from Brenda stopped. They were replaced by letters from a law firm in the city. The first one was a formal offer. The price for the easement now up to $250,000. I didn't respond. The second one was a cease and desist letter, a masterpiece of legal absurdity. It accused me of tortious interference with their business operations by refusing to negotiate. It claimed my unreasonable withholding of access was causing them irreparable financial harm. They were threatening to sue me for the damages caused by their own bad planning. I laughed out loud when I read it. It was like a burglar threatening to sue a homeowner for having locks on his doors. I filed it away with the other documents. Meanwhile, the community was starting to notice. The first wave of condo buyers who had purchased pre-construction were being told of delays. Closing dates were pushed back. A local real estate blog published a post titled, "The Road to Nowhere at Hawthorne Summit." People started asking questions. The temporary construction road was a muddy, rutted disaster, completely unsuitable for residential vehicles. The county planning board confirmed that no certificate of occupancy could be issued for any of the 40 units until permanent, approved emergency and residential access was established. Pinnacle was trapped. They had 40 homes sold, with 40 anxious buyers and 40 sets of mortgage lenders all breathing down their necks. The carrying costs on a stalled project of that size had to be astronomical. Loan interest, insurance, security. Every day of delay was a hemorrhage of money. This is when their tactics turned from bureaucratic to personal. A post appeared on the town's community Facebook page. It was anonymous, but the language had Brenda Sterling's fingerprints all over it. It painted a picture of a heartless landowner holding a wonderful new housing project hostage, preventing young families and hard-working people from moving into their dream homes. It talked about the spirit of community and how one person's selfishness was hurting everyone. A few of my neighbors, people I'd known for years, called me. "Art, what's going on?" they'd ask. "Are you really the one stopping this thing?" I told them my side of the story, quietly and factually. I told them about the initial lowball offer, the assumption, the bent survey marker. I didn't tell them about the deed from 1952. That was my ace in the hole, and it wasn't time to play it yet. Most of them understood. They knew me. They knew I wasn't an unreasonable man. But the seed of doubt had been planted in the wider community. I was being painted as the villain. The pressure campaign escalated. County code enforcement showed up at my house, acting on an anonymous tip. A stern-faced woman with a clipboard wanted to inspect my workshop for unpermitted electrical work and my septic system for compliance. My workshop was built by my father in 1970, and my septic was installed in 1985. Everything was to code for its time, but that didn't stop them from spending 3 hours trying to find a violation, a point of leverage they could use against me. They found nothing. I was polite, offered them coffee, and documented the entire visit, including the license plate of their vehicle. A week later, it was a surveyor from a firm I didn't recognize. He was on the edge of my property, near the highway, setting up a transit. I walked down the road to meet him. "Can I help you?" I asked. He was a young kid, barely out of school. He looked nervous. Yes, sir. I'm with Northwood Surveying. We've been contracted by Pinnacle Developments to survey a potential access route here." He pointed, and my blood ran cold. He was staking a line that cut directly across the corner of my front yard, shaving off a 30-foot triangle of my property. "You're on my land," I said, my voice dangerously quiet. "No, sir. The preliminary map shows—" "I don't care what your preliminary map shows," I cut him off. "I am Arthur Vance. My license number is on the pin 3 feet from your left boot. You are trespassing. Your equipment is trespassing. I want you to pack up your gear and leave my property immediately." He looked from me to the pin, his face paling. He saw my name and number on the cap. In our profession, that's like seeing the sheriff's badge. You don't argue with the guy whose name is on the monument. I'm sorry, sir. I was just following the work order," he stammered. "Your work order is wrong," I said, "and the people who gave it to you know it's wrong. They're trying to use you to intimidate me. Now please leave." He left. He practically ran back to his truck. This was a new level of desperation. They were trying to manufacture a boundary dispute, to tie me up in court for years, hoping I'd get tired and sell. The problem for them was, I was a better surveyor than anyone they could ever hire. I knew my lines down to the 100th of a foot. It had now been 8 months since I'd last spoken to Brenda Sterling. 8 months of silence on my end. The condos stood finished, empty shells overlooking a valley they couldn't reach. They were like a fleet of ships built in a bottle, perfect and useless. The local news had picked up the story. Pinnacle's stock price had taken a hit. The online forums were a firestorm of angry buyers and gloating locals. The final confrontation came on a Tuesday morning in October. The hickory tree was a blaze of gold. I was on my porch, drinking coffee, when the black sedan came up my road again. This time it didn't stop at the gate. It drove right up to my house, spitting gravel. Brenda Sterling got out. She looked terrible. Her expensive suit was rumpled, there were dark circles under her eyes, and the practiced smile was completely gone, replaced by a tight, frantic mask. She was followed by a man in a rumpled suit who looked like a lawyer who spent too much time losing in court. "Vance," she said, her voice sharp and brittle, "we need to end this. Now." I took a slow sip of my coffee. I didn't stand up. "There's nothing to end. I'm just enjoying my morning." "Don't play games," she almost shouted. The lawyer put a restraining hand on her arm. "We have 40 families in hotels. We are losing millions of dollars. This has gone on long enough." The lawyer stepped forward. "Mr. Vance, my name is Marcus Thorne. I represent Pinnacle Developments. My client is here today to make you a final, comprehensive offer. We are prepared to pay you $500,000 for the easement. In addition, we will dismiss any and all legal claims we are currently exploring against you. It's a generous offer. It makes this whole unpleasantness go away." I looked at him, then back at Brenda. Her eyes were wide, desperate. She was bleeding out, and she thought throwing money at the wound would stop it. "Unpleasantness?" I repeated slowly. "You mean like trespassing with heavy equipment? Dumping debris on my land? Filing frivolous complaints with code enforcement? Sending a surveyor to stake a claim on my front yard? Harassing me in the local press? Is that the unpleasantness you're talking about?" The lawyer's face remained impassive, but Brenda flinched. "Let's not get bogged down in the past," the lawyer said smoothly. "Let's focus on a solution that benefits everyone. $500,000. You can walk away from this a wealthy man." I set my coffee mug down on the porch railing. I looked out at my road, the one my father and I built. I thought about the bent survey pin. I thought about the quiet I was trying to protect. "The answer is still no," I said. Brenda Sterling finally broke. "Why?" she shrieked, her voice cracking. "Why are you doing this? What do you want? Just name a price, you stubborn old fool. Name it." I stood up. I was taller than both of them. I looked down at her, not with anger, but with a kind of weary pity. "You still don't get it, do you? You never have. You think this is about money. You think you can just bully and buy your way through the world. You built 40 homes on a handshake you never got. You gambled everything on the idea that you were smarter and more powerful than the person you needed something from." I walked into my house and came back out with a single file folder. I opened it and took out the certified copy of the 1952 deed. I handed it to the lawyer. "You might want to read this," I said. "Specifically, page 3, paragraph 2. The restrictive covenant from Silas Croft." The lawyer Thorne took the document. He started to read. As his eyes moved down the page, I saw his professional calm evaporate. His jaw tightened. He read the paragraph twice, then a third time, his lips moving silently. He looked up, first at the empty condos visible on the ridge behind my house, then at me. The look on his face was one of pure, unadulterated horror. He knew exactly what he was looking at. It was a fatal flaw in the title, a legal time bomb that had just gone off. He handed the paper to Brenda. "What is it?" she demanded. "It's a restrictive covenant," he said, his voice a dead monotone. "From 1952, it explicitly prohibits the granting of a right-of-way for subdivision from this property's northern boundary." Brenda stared at the paper, her eyes darting across the page. The legal language was probably dense to her, but she understood the lawyer's tone. "What does that mean?" she whispered. "It means," I said, stepping forward, "that even if I wanted to sell you an easement, even if you offered me $10 million, it's legally questionable whether I could even grant it. The title to your own land forbids it, and any attempt to do so would get tied up in court for years by any of Silas Croft's descendants who wanted to enforce it. You didn't just fail to secure access. You bought a piece of land that can never have the access you need." She looked from the paper to me, her face a mess of confusion, fury, and dawning despair. All the fight went out of her. She just stood there, the document trembling in her hand. Her entire project, her career, was built on a foundation of sand, and the tide had just come in. "You knew," she said, her voice barely audible. "How long have you known?" "Months," I said, "since you bent my survey pin." Thorne, the lawyer, had already taken a step back towards the car. He was in damage control mode now. His client was radioactive. "Brenda, we need to go," he said urgently. "We need to call the office." She didn't seem to hear him. She just stared at me. "You could have told us. You could have done your due diligence, I countered. You could have listened when I said no the first time. You could have treated me and my property with a shred of respect. You did none of those things. This isn't my fault. This is the consequence of your own arrogance. She finally looked away, down at the gravel road she so desperately wanted. It was just a road, but it had beaten her. Thorne practically bundled her into the car. As they drove away, much slower this time, I saw the fight was over. The war was won. I hadn't fired a shot. I had just stood my ground, used my knowledge, and let their own mistakes crush them. The aftermath was a slow-motion collapse. Pinnacle Developments issued a statement citing unforeseen historical deed complications and put the project on indefinite hold. The 40 buyers either got their deposits back or initiated a massive class action lawsuit. The story was front-page news in the regional paper. Brenda Sterling was fired, disappearing from the corporate world. I heard later she moved out of state. The company itself filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy within the year. The summit at Hawthorne becoming an albatross they couldn't shed. For a long time, the 40 condos sat there, silent and empty on the hill, a monument to greed and poor planning. Eventually, the bank that held the note sold the entire parcel at a massive loss to a conservation trust. The trust's plan was to slowly dismantle the buildings and let the land revert to its natural state. They had no need for a road. Sometimes I walk up to the ridge at the back of my property and look at the half-deconstructed buildings. The process is slow. Nature is already starting to reclaim the land. Vines are climbing the vinyl siding, and saplings are pushing up through the cracks in the unused parking lots. It's a quiet, peaceful kind of decay. I never got the $500,000. I never wanted it. What I got was better. I have my quiet. I have my road. The survey pin at my back corner is straight and true again. I replaced it myself. Every morning, I walk down to the gate with my coffee and listen to the sound of the wind in the hickory trees. And the only crunch I hear on the gravel is the sound of my own boots. The line held. It was all I ever wanted. The world is full of people who think they can erase lines with enough money and pressure. But a line is a real thing. It's an agreement. It's a fact. And some of us still believe that facts matter.